and welcome to Another Bite, where we rewatch the most innovative and intriguing pitches from Shark Tank. I'm Jorie, and I'm joined by Ariel.
Hey, everyone.
And Sleigh It Ain't So, it's Santa Claus. Well, really, it's Mitch Allen from Hire Santa. But honestly, isn't that the same thing? Welcome, Mitch.
Oh, so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, so we're going to just dive right in and make it rain, dear. Mitch, could you give us a little background on why hire Santa, but more importantly, like what goes through your mind as you're picking a business that you get really excited about and want to invest in and build out?
Such a great question. It's also a complicated question. So,
of course, walk me through.
Yeah, I've been a lifelong entrepreneur, and really Hire Santa was just an accident. I had another company. We're doing financial education, and my executive assistant asked me to dress up like Santa. I don't look like Santa, and I looked less like Santa then than I do now, but I had a ton of fun. And one thing led to another. And my wife asked me to dress up like Santa again for our daughter's cookie decorating party, and just had so much fun. And the reaction of children to Santa is just amazing. I just fell in love with that experience of being Santa to my children. I had a friend ask me to appear for them. And then one thing led to another. Somebody's wanting to pay me to be Santa. And I'm like, light bulb.
Even better.
Yeah. Entrepreneurial, went off. And I'm like, well, I'm an internet marketer by heart, and threw up a website and suddenly had more business than I could do. So bought the domain Hire Santa. And, 6 years later, I'm on Shark Tank.
Wow. What a meteoric rise. But you mentioned you're a lifelong entrepreneur. So walk me through that light bulb moment when you were like, oh no, this is a business. What was it that was happening that made you realize that you wanted to go all in on this specific business as, being Santa?
Yes. And it's, as an entrepreneur, you just sort of walk through life with this lens of opportunity seeking.
Mm-hmm.
And so most of the businesses I've started, and I've started more than a dozen businesses and sold several, shut down several, et cetera. And they just sort of happen. It's not this grand plan of, hey, I'm going to go out and start a Santa business. Well,
Right.
Just sort of falls into your lap a little bit. And then you realize that there's an opportunity there. Mm. And for Santa, unlike other businesses, it was just, this is fun. It's interesting. I'm making a little bit of money doing it. And then it became a much bigger business. Once I had more business than I could do personally as Santa, I started sending other Santas out in my stead and then started growing. And what's interesting about Hire Santa is that originally I thought, this is such a silly business. And for my other, I'm putting quotes here, more serious business friends, I was like, I'm not really wanting to tell them about this Santa business that I'm doing. I'm dressing up like Santa Claus and going out. I'm having a lot of fun. I'm helping to bring the love and joy of Christmas to people, but it's also sort of silly. I'm dressing up. And I had some good business friends and we were talking about it. And they were telling me wow, you've got better margin than you do in your lead generation business. And, you've got your demand is better and your cost to acquire clients is great. You should go all in. And I'm like, man, I should. And so from that point, I, just sort of switched gears about it's a good business. It is a lifestyle business. Mm-hmm. It's not a business that's going to be $100 million,
Sure.
But it's going to be a great business that's going to fund my lifestyle. And for those reasons, I just think that, it really, to me, came across as here's a business that isn't going to go away, meaning that it's going to be here 50 years from now, regardless of what AI does, regardless of what wage arbitrage across the world happens. People are still going to want to have Santa to come to their home and office. Brands are going to want to associate themselves with Christmas through the use of Santa.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's almost unique in any of the businesses that I've looked at to buy, sell, or be in.
Talk about evergreen.
Seriously. You mentioned alluded to chatting with some of your business friends, some peer groups. I would love to just know more information. What are some of the things that you chat with them about, or any resources and tips that you have? Because a lot of our listeners are, entrepreneurs looking to start their own businesses. So how did you find those connections? And what are some of the benefits that you found coming out of that?
Sure. So I can talk about this. I think finding a group of peers is incredibly important. And I've been a member of most of the business organizations. The one that I've been in the longest is Entrepreneurs Organization, or EO. I think it's eonetwork.org. It's just a great organization full of people who have not just small businesses, but you have to have $1 million or more in revenue to be a member. Mm-hmm. And you get together with other people. And it's not like networking. It's about experience sharing, because you can't go to your neighbor and say, I can't make payroll this month. They don't understand that. Or you can't go, oh, I just signed this $1 million contract. I'm crushing it. They don't quite understand it in the same way that a business owner understands. And so being part of an organization and being associated with other entrepreneurs that have gone through the same thing and will share their experience, not give advice, but share experience. And there's a big difference from that. And so from Entrepreneurs Organization, I've really gained a lot of knowledge, as well as like all of my friends are now from this organization because we have sort of the shared bond and the shared tribulations of being in a small business.
It's great to have that support and have other peers that you can talk to about some of those persistent issues that come up on fun whenever you start a business.
Definitely.
So as you think about like advice that you get from like your entrepreneur peer group, how do you think about picking your next business idea? Do you usually run it by your group? Do you kind of think through what the opportunities are? Would love to just kind of dive into that.
Well, it's a timely question for me. I had a good size internet lead generation business in the consumer legal services space, and my non-compete was up fairly recently. So right now, I've started sort of a holding company, which is sort of in fashion right now. But really, we're like looking for opportunities and trying to take myself, and I've got a couple other partners, like what are the things that only we can do or the things that we do really well? And how can we leverage our basically a lifetime, 20 plus years for each of us being in business? How can we use those networks? How can we now apply those things and add value to customers? So it's a little bit different than the past. In the past, I've looked for opportunities. And one of the things that to start a business, I've always had a client. Like one of my big things is I'm not going to start a business unless I already have a client, whether it be somebody wanting me to do some consulting or I've already got a client. So it's way easier to do that than to say, I'm just going to throw out my shingle and, hope something comes in the door. And in some ways, that's what we're doing now. And so it's harder that you have to now figure out what is it that you're going to do and what is it that value that you're going to create. Another harder thing for me right now is the size of the opportunity. When you're 20 years old, you can go after an opportunity that you might have $1 million business. But if you're 50 and you've got partners that are 50 and they've got obligations and, you can't just go after $1 million opportunity. You've got to go on an opportunity that is going to be much bigger than that and have the ability to throw off cash needed to sustain not only the employees, but also the owners. And so, creating a small business, I think I could create a bunch of those right now. But to create a medium-sized business or even a big business, that's something that I think I'm struggling with right now. And you throw in AI right now and how dramatically things are changing with that. And we're even using AI at Hire Santa right now. It's both a scary and exciting time to be starting businesses.
Definitely.
There's no secret formula for better service throughout the customer journey, but there is the all-new Service Hub from HubSpot. It makes it infinitely easier to scale customer support and increase retention. By bringing service and support together in one powerful platform, you can deliver the best experiences for your customers and your teams. Free up time for your reps to focus on complex issues with an AI-powered help desk. Proactively drive retention with customer health scores that help keep your business ahead, and give your entire go-to-market team the data they need to operate as one unified, powerful front. Also, you can easily support, strengthen, and grow your customer base. Secrets out, HubSpot Service Hub is a game changer. Visit HubSpot.com/service to do more for your customers today. So bringing it back to Hire Santa a little bit, when you were starting to experience that scale, so when you had that moment of like, it can't just be me as Santa anymore. Like, what was the thought process that you went through bringing on like that first employee and sort of expanding the business? And how did you make sure that like the brands that you had created, those joyful moments sustained itself through that first employee and then now through your network of talented Santas?
So it was time to bring on more people just when I couldn't do it myself. And as an entrepreneur, I make the mistake, and the entrepreneurs that I speak with, many times they don't hire fast enough or soon enough to deal with what they're doing. And so when I first started, I had to decide outside of myself. I had to make a decision about how I want the business to be run. Do I want to sell leads? I actually came from that background. So I thought, well, I could just generate a lead, say in Atlanta, and I'll sell it to a Santa in Atlanta for some amount of money. Or I can take that lead and I can turn it into a client and then outsource the Santa. And I had to look at it and compare that to my other markets that I've dealt with in the past. And in this one in particular, I didn't feel like the Santas because many of these at the time are older gentlemen, less tech savvy. And like the work needed to take a lead and turn it into a client. I felt like I was probably better suited and the knowledge that I had was better suited to do that. And so I chose not to sell leads like I'd done in other businesses, but instead I'm going to become an agency or a staffing company in some ways. And I'm going to do all the hard work of generating the lead, turning them into a client. And then I'm going to create the network of Santas across the country to then fill those things. And so I had to make a decision. I made that very early on. And then to your point about keeping the quality, and this is something that we even struggle with today because our number one issue is we need more Santas. We will sell out probably in October or early November for key Saturdays in December. We'll just run out of Santas. And so we're always hunting for Santas. And over the last 5 years, we add more than 1,000 Santas a year to our database, and we're still run out of Santas. So how do you keep the quality up? By also doing it. It's a delicate balance. We like to say all our Santas have a real beard, a real belly, and a real jolly.
Okay. Love it.
And so we do constant, not actual training, but in essence, it's training. We have a closed Facebook group that has, I think, 3,500 professional Santa Clauses in it. We've got several thousand more Santas that are not in that group, but are in our database. And in that group, we do a bi-weekly, what I call State of the Season. And we do what's going on in the Santa Claus community. It's a Facebook Live session. We do some training with that. We also interview Santas and have them impart their own knowledge to Santas. And so we're trying to raise the bar of it. Believe it or not, there are Santa conventions. I just got back from a big one. There were 600 Santas.
SantaCon.
SantaCon, exactly.
That's right. And I present during those things as well. So we're there to sign up new Santas, but we're also there to be part of the community. And I feel like Hire Santa is really part of the Santa Claus community. And the employees, back to that question, the employees we have right now, they're all in. They love being part of Hire Santa because what other company puts a smile on your face? When I talk about, I was in this internet lead gen business, we did X number of millions of dollars, it was awesome. No one cares. But, I helped bring the love and joy of Christmas to millions of people around the country or around the world even. Like it brings a smile to people's face and it gets you on Shark Tank.
Get paid for spreading joy.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. So, which brings us to Shark Tank, right? We have a general sense that like you're sitting in front of the entrepreneurs, but I was curious when you were watching back your pitch, how realistic or like true to form was the pitch that was edited for TV versus like the pitch that you gave and the conversation you had from the shark? I'm always super curious. Is that experience translated correctly in television or were there things that the pitch left out?
This is my number one concern after I was off of the thing was that I thought that I slayed it while I was there.
Good fun.
And you walk in, and your listeners know this because you've talked with other ones, but it's live. You walk in, may or may not know this, you walk in and you hit your spot and you're supposed to stand there for up to a minute, just waiting. You're not supposed to say anything. You're not supposed to smile. And you've got 5 sharks looking at you. You can't see the cameras. And then a voice from above says, begin. And then you start. And you're filming nonstop, no cuts, no anything until you leave. And so you mess up. You just got to keep on going. And they do a great job because you don't see the cameras. And so it really does appear that you are looking at this and you're making a pitch. And so we're there and I'm making the pitch. And in 15 minutes, first 15 minutes, everyone is out except for Mr. Wonderful, Kevin. So I'm in there already 15 minutes, which isn't that long. I'd talked with other people. I'd done a ton of prep. I can talk about that. I was expecting to be there an hour or so. And within 15 minutes, everyone's out except for Kevin. And the last words that my wife told me before I left, because she'd watched all the episodes with me, I'd taken notes. She says, I hope you get a deal, but just don't get a deal with Kevin.
No, and that's the one shark left.
Yeah, I'm like, oh no, I'm what am I doing? I've got this great business and everybody's out for Kevin. So I negotiated with him for about 20 minutes or more. I'd done a lot of prep, a lot of negotiating, studying, and negotiated with him for about 20 minutes.
Wow.
And then we sort of gotten to a point where I then, in essence, took all the risk off with this offer of, hey, I'll pay you back your money because I was there to get a deal.
Right.
I'll pay you back very quickly, but the long-term equity, I'm going to keep most of it. Then Damon came in and I negotiated with him for about 10 minutes or so. And then Barbara came back in And I did with her. So I thought then in the cut, the 8 or 12 minutes that they showed, I thought that they took the flavor of it and I thought that it was translated very well. I thought that it came off with it. We looked good. And I really tried to own the room. I thought that came in. I really knew my numbers. Like I thought that really came across as well. So I thought it was very fair. And, ultimately I was super pleased with how it came out.
Definitely.
You mentioned to our producer that you decided to kind of lead the pitch versus letting the sharks lead. And I kind of want to just dive into that a little bit. So what kind of made you decide that? And what kind of tips or tools you mentioned, you knew your numbers up front. Like what were some of the key things that really helped you feel that confidence to just kind of navigate that room in an otherwise really intimidating kind of setting?
Okay, let me unpack that a little bit. One, I over-prepared, and I probably am just naturally do that. I listened to every episode. I actually hired a couple of interns to help me with the entire process. It's a 9-month process, and wrote down every question, not literally every question, but most questions fall within particular categories, and knew what I was going to say about virtually every question. And then I had 5 questions that I thought, these are really hard questions for me to answer. And I memorized answers specifically for these 5 questions. I then practiced. So through Entrepreneurs Organization, EO, I presented, had this dress rehearsal with my forum, which is a group of about 8 people. Then I went to another forum, did the same thing. I then contacted the LA chapter. And when I flew out there, they set up another mock Shark Tank for me.
Oh, cool.
So I'd literally gone through this process multiple times before I actually stepped onto the carpet. And so by the time I got to the carpet, I really had this thought of, I want to enjoy this. I'll never do this again. So I want to be present. I want to enjoy the experience. And I also almost had this thought of, I'm ready to get it over with. Not like I'm bored with it, but I'm here. I've done all the things I can do. So I'm very much prepared to step in front of them. So all that preparation, as well as being an entrepreneur for, at the time, 25 years or so before that, I'd been in lots of situations, as well as I used to work for Citigroup and in decision science. And so I've been in really sort of
high pressure,
big situations before. And so I probably had a little bit of an unfair advantage in this wasn't my first company. This wasn't the first time I'm in a boardroom, that it wasn't as intimidating to me, maybe as to someone it was the very first company. But I would say that if you're going to do this, prepare and practice. And then your last question was about owning the room. When you watch Shark Tanks, many times you'll see, and this is the best example of it, is when Kevin usually, or sometimes Mark, is recapping what's going on. All right, you've got an offer from this person. Yours is this. What are you going to do? I went in and said, I'm going to be that person. Anytime we're talking, or I've got an offer, or after every round of negotiating, I would say, all right, your offer is this and this. I've offered this. And then would talk sort of the next step of the negotiating, so that I felt like I was in control of the room and I was directing the conversation. And when Damon comes in, I'm talking to Kevin, then I'm talking to Damon, and then I'm sort of talking to everyone. And I really felt like I was controlling the room versus letting Kevin or Mark or whoever it is, they're the person who's directing the conversation.
I feel like it's easier said than done when you're in front of a lot of very top investors, some of the best in the business. Were you at all a little starstruck when you saw them? Or were you just this is a board meeting?
Or were you my wife doesn't like Kevin, so I don't like Kevin.
Everyone but Kevin.
Yeah, so I really wasn't. I don't really get starstruck, though. If I was, it's not celebrities, it's business people. So these would be the people that I would be, interested in talking with. But funny story that happened was I was the first person to present, and on September 12th of that year, and then it aired in December. And 4 or 5 times, either one of the producers or one of the hands would come up to me and ask me, "Are you nervous?"
And I wasn't thinking, before you asked.
Right.
That's exactly the opposite of what you tell your child or whoever it is when they're about to do something. And I was thinking, I must look like I am scared. But I'm like, this is awesome. I'm totally into this. I'm totally enjoying it. And literally right before the doors open, there's somebody off to the side. And he says to me, and so I've got myself, I've got Santa, Mrs. Claus behind me. I've got 2 of my friends who flew out to be mascots. And I've got 20 Santas behind that as well. And there's a guy to the left, and he's about to open the doors. And he says, all right, when the doors open, just walk through. We won't say anything. You're live, because they're filming you walk down the Shark Tank tunnel.
That hallway.
And then he leans into me and says, are you nervous? And I'm thinking to myself, this is like the fifth time somebody's asked me this.
Yeah.
Either they're trying to make me nervous or I must look like I'm nervous. So I lean over to him and I say, I am freaking out. And I tell you, you talk about turning the tables.
Yeah.
He was like,
He was not expecting
Oh
that.
no.
oh no.
Yeah.
I mean, his eyes light up and he goes, oh, do we need to stop? Do we need to stop? And I'm like, man, I'm just kidding with you. I'm ready to go. But it was entirely, and maybe that lightened the mood a little up for me as well. But it was just really funny. Like they just kept asking me if I'm nervous. And I'm like, this is a once in a lifetime experience. And I'm like totally here to enjoy it.
Do you think that's like purposeful though? Like, because you mentioned also that like they make you stare at the sharks for a minute and then they're like, begin. Do you think to try to like ham up the TV aspect of Shark Tank, do you think it's like they're doing it on purpose to see if they can trip people up?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think the hitting your mark and then waiting is just about adjusting cameras.
Fair.
You know, they've got hidden cameras everywhere. And they do a fabulous job where you do not know anyone is there except for the sharks.
That's really cool.
And my Santas.
Surprised.
Like you do not know them because they're all off. The producers are off to your left, sort of behind you, and it's in a dark space. All the lights are on you. And in this area, the cameras are hidden really well from above and, behind mirrors and things. Like you just don't see them. So I think it's probably more of that. And it's interesting about Hire Santa and just in general. To get on the show, and the reason Hire Santa gets on the show and lead gen business doesn't, is because it's entertaining. To get on the show, it's all about entertainment. Like ABC wants something entertaining. But once you get on that, it in some ways shifts. It shifts from these are investors, they're playing their part, but they are looking for a business to invest in where they can at least get their money out or make some money, whatever it happens to be, maybe find something really interesting. So it shifts from entertainment to
business. You're
talking to the sharks and it's business. And I think that you have to have both. One of the most difficult things that I've actually coached some people who've been on Shark Tank. I think the most difficult thing is your valuation. That I didn't want to spend 20 minutes debating my valuation. So coming in with a fair valuation, I think is really important. It's also really hard because you don't want to undervalue you, but you don't want to overvalue because undervaluing, they're going to negotiate. So you've got to at least put a fair valuation. But if you put it too high, well, then now you've spent 20 minutes negotiating and you may have just turned off several sharks who are just not interested anymore.
Do you have a pro tip or almost like a formula that you recommend to people that potentially are going on Shark Tank, but also could be just thinking about the valuation of their business in general that you'd recommend people use, even if it's like as a loose rule when they think about their valuation?
Yeah, sure. I think about this at least annually when I sort of fill my own personal financial statement and like, in essence, try to value what's the value of Hire Santa. And I think that small businesses, many times they look at the stock market and they see, S&P's at 21 times earnings. Well, that's entirely realistic. I've sold a good sized small business and that was growing. And I've bought several businesses recently. Like buying businesses at 2 or 3x is not uncommon, buying and selling it. And that's of earnings. Most time small businesses don't have debt, but when you think about like EBITDA, 2 or 3 times is not unheard of. 5, 6 times is a good valuation for a company. You get anywhere close to 10 and it's like, just take the money. But I'm not always a fan of like selling companies. Once you sell a company, you got to think about how am I going to replace that income?
Sure.
And does the amount of money that I've gotten back, am I going to be able to generate return after taxes of a similar amount? And it's okay to take some chips off the table, but you really have to think about, is this something that I can then now live off of, or do I have other income to live off of? Because if you're getting, say, 5x, there's no way you're going to get, 20% return on your money or even more than that, after the sale.
Yeah. No, I love the flexibility as well that I know when you were first chatting with Kevin, it was, hey, we'll do like 50% like until you guys get your income back. And then it goes to 10%. Like I loved kind of that unique like deal structure because it allowed you to still maintain the equity that you wanted without having to give more or less. So can you kind of like walk us through how you kind of came to that conclusion as you were thinking through like kind of partially valuation, what you needed cash flow wise for the business? Like how do you kind of weigh that all out?
Sure. And the unique thing about Hire Santa is it's a service business. Most of the businesses that go into Shark Tank, somewhere like 95 or 97% are product-based. And really it's designed for product-based businesses. Mine's a service-based business. I had really gone into it and had many different ways I was going to negotiate. And they cut most of the negotiating out with Kevin because we negotiated for, again, about 20 minutes. And I was asking him questions about why he wouldn't do certain deals, what he was looking for. And I'd ask him about risk. And I was like, is it just that you're worried that you're not going to get your money back out? And he had sort of answered a couple of things in that line. And so one of my negotiating strategies was, I'm just going to take all the risk out. I'm just going to say, this deal is in essence risk-free to you, because looking at my numbers, you can see that even if we don't grow like I think we're going to grow this year, already had some big contracts, you're going to get your money back in less than 2 years. So there's no risk to you. And if things go well, you'll get your money out faster, in less than a year. So you'll get all your money out, you'll still have equity, and you get to be in business with me. So what's not to love about it? So my thought was, let's take all the risk out, because I wanted to get a deal. Like the number one thing I said is, I want a deal. Even if it's not necessarily a great deal, I want a deal. And the thought about that was, I had heard that if you get a deal, you're almost guaranteed to air. But if you don't get a deal, that less than 50% of those companies, only the most entertaining or interesting ones actually make it. And for me, the value was the advertising, the third-party credibility. The exposure. So I had many different ways I could negotiate. And one of them was, if it was about risk, I was just going to take all the risk off the table for the Sharks.
If you had to, would you have made a deal with Kevin to make sure that you potentially aired on Shark Tank? Or were you like, hard stop, it cannot be Kevin?
I feel like his wife wouldn't be happy.
I think she was half joking with that. I would have had to apologize after the fact that.
But we got a deal, honey.
Yeah, we got a deal. So I would have definitely done a deal with Kevin, as long as it was fair.
Sure.
It's funny because they cut it out. It makes no sense. He talked about a royalty deal, which makes no sense in the service business at all. Right. And we talked about a variety of things. I would have definitely done it. And we were very close. He and Damon both. If I hadn't got a deal with Barbara, I would have gotten a deal with one of them, I'm sure.
Had you gone into the tank with an ideal shark in mind, or was it, nope, because this is more of an exposure play, it kind of doesn't matter the shark? Had you stack ranked them at all, or was it just whichever gives me the best deal?
I don't know if I should say that.
But you could just say yes or no.
Everyone, I think, wants Mark Cuban as well. But I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He's here. My background's internet marketing. He's definitely an internet guy. So I think it would have been very interesting. And I actually have talked with him since, because he's very nice and very gracious and generous, that it would have been great to have him as a partner. Robert actually wasn't on my episode. He's another sort of internet tech guy. And so I think we'd have had just other things in common besides the business.
True.
But I think everyone, and actually as part of my presentation, I had gone through it with each person about why I want each particular shark that was there. And I had a little paragraph about, why I want Barbara, why I want Kevin, why I want Mark, why I want Lori, why I want Damon, because they each have their own strengths. So I was there to get a deal, and I ended up getting a deal with Barbara and couldn't be happier with that fact.
So I have to ask, post Shark Tank, as much as you're able to tell us, what is your relationship with Barbara? How often are you talking to her or her team? And what's her presence like in Hire Santa post Tank?
So Barbara's really great. Her strength is in marketing and promotion, and she has a really good team. And I'm in contact with her team monthly. Not all of her companies do this, but just from my own background and how I run companies, I send financials every month to them. And then sometimes I'll talk about an update or what we're doing. And if they have any questions, we talk about it. COVID sort of messed it up a little bit, but she also then has retreats that I've gone on, which is really great. In person, she's just like your really fun mother or grandmother or aunt, whatever it is, who's really smart, but really funny and always engaged. She's just a wonderful one and entirely fair. The process about closing our deal, and not all deals close. Sure. Ours took a while to close, but the paperwork and the fairness of the agreement was incredibly fair, and happy to still be a partner, happy to write a check to her. And I think interesting, I was maybe all Shark Tanks deals, but definitely with Barbara's, the fastest to pay back her investment, literally just a few months that she ended up getting, all of her money back.
Amazing.
As part of the deal that we did. So yeah, she's really, really great to work with.
So did you get that Shark Tank bump that you were expecting after the tank? Like you said that you were able to kind of like deliver really quickly. Like walk us through what happened on your site, what happened with your bookings, especially because it aired in December. Like what kind of traffic were you dealing with after the Shark Tank?
So if anyone's listening that is going to appear on Shark Tank, I did think we did a couple things right. Number one is we had a big watch party. Like I invited the entrepreneurial organization from Dallas and Fort Worth we rented out a theater and we literally watched it on big screen,
Cool.
Catered food. And at the same time, we threw up our website traffic onto the screen while we're watching it. So
Dashboard.
sort of in real time, we're able to see our Google Analytics and our traffic that's coming through at the same time. A huge, huge hit to the website. Many times Barbara's team has me talk to their newer entrepreneurs as well. And I didn't get the sales jump that other people do because I'm a service and not a product.
Sure.
So I've talked with several people who get 2 or 3 years worth of sales literally within the first week.
Yeah.
Just absolutely crazy type of experience. For me, we did get quite a few leads, but since it aired in December and we're already sold out, we're already sold out of Santa's coming to your home. We got a few, we captured them all. But even more importantly than that is as an internet marketer, search engine optimization expert, the value has been like the links that we've gotten from a variety of people. And just like this episode, we'll have a great link from y'all to our website. Like that's really gold to me because now of the 374 keywords that we track, we're number one for over 260 of them.
Wow. Okay.
And we're in the top 5 for all but, a handful of those keywords. So, that's how we drive traffic. And Shark Tank and then the subsequent media exposure as well as just internet exposure really increase the number of backlinks to our website, which has helped us to grow. And that's still living to this day.
That's incredible. We all love some good backlinks opportunities, bump up our domain rankings. With all the interest that kind of came through, I'm sure you saw some like immediate results in terms of like maybe you had lower CPAs for like your content leads that you were driving, but did it open up any new markets or new areas that you were unable to like reach before? Do you have any like examples of that?
Oh, absolutely. So I say this, and there's a great example that led to then one of our updates. And we've had 2 updates. We had one a year afterwards, and then we just had one in 2023, just this last December. And marketing executives who are in a room and they're looking to refresh their Santa program or create one, inevitably somebody in that marketing room or that event room watches Shark Tank and they're saying, well, where do we find a Santa? And they said, wasn't there a company that hires Santas on Shark Tank? Google. Ranked number 1. And, now they're talking to us. And so that happened with Bloomingdale's in New York City. It's a great client of ours. And so that literally from that, and Shark Tank gives us this third-party credibility, this validation that now you're a, quote, real company. And that's one of the sort of our core values is that we are a professional company. We communicate with companies on their same level, whether you're a Fortune 500 company or whether you're a mom and pop company. Like, we can communicate on your same level. We've dealt with RFPs. Like, we are a professional level company. And Shark Tank really gave us that third-party validation and credibility sort of in that professional level. And so we closed the deal with Bloomingdale's. And then we actually had an update at Bloomingdale's, New York City, their flagship store. And that all came about because we were on Shark Tank.
That's amazing. Incredible opportunity. You mentioned a little bit, that the SEO really drives like a lot of traffic to your site. A lot of that interest and that intent is there. What are some of the pros and cons? I have to ask with like kind of having this like seasonal business that you faced and that you kind of like navigated through.
What does Santa do in July?
What's he doing his own time?
Well, listen, there are Christmas in July
It's
events.
true. It's
so
true,
we do have
actually.
Christmas in July. We do. One of the main questions people ask me, you should do the Easter Bunny. Well, we do that a little bit as well. That's probably 3% of our business. But really, and this was one of the questions that was asked, but they cut it out from the episode, was, hey, you're a seasonal business. Like I knew I was going to get this question on Shark Tank. And my response was, yes, we provide our service during the last 6 weeks of the year. But saying that we're a seasonal business is like saying that Mark Cuban's Mavericks are a seasonal business because their season's only 4 or 5 months.
Good comparison.
That's not a seasonal business because all the real work is done in the off season. The trades, the advertising contracts, the promotions, like all the real work is done before the season. And then during the season, you're now implementing all the things that you're doing. And in Hire Santa, it's the same way. It's much slower, yes, but we're trying to find Santas. We're working on big contracts. We're doing outbound sales. We're working on our websites. This year we've entirely revamped our scheduling system. So we've developed from the ground up. It's taken us a couple of years, and now we're rolling it out, an entirely new soup to nuts scheduling system with our own Santa Finder tool, and it's awesome. Also, we've got 7 big initiatives. One of them is using AI to better respond to emails and integrating that with HubSpot. So we really are working on the business during the off season. And then during the season, the last 4 or 5 months of the year, it's all hands on deck. Everybody's in the sleigh.
Showtime.
To get things done.
Santa's working on his list year round.
Checking it twice in the off season, apparently. So you mentioned that you also do the Easter Bunny. Do you have other extensions in mind? Or is it nope, we're just going to maybe focus on the Easter Bunny a little bit, mostly do Santa, and that's going to be just our main business model? Are you always looking for opportunities to expand, or are you just really focused on getting primarily Santa right?
This is a question I struggle with a lot because I would like for the business to grow.
Of course.
So in order for employees to grow and have opportunities, the business has to grow. Mm-hmm. And the size of our business right now is capped in some ways. So we are looking for other things. And I like to think about it sort of as Venn diagram. You've got Santa staffing in the middle. What are other things that go on top of it? Well, we don't do photography. And I've chosen not to, which is many of the malls you go into, there's a big company, a private equity backed company that does most of the malls, and they sell photos. We're a Santa staffing company. We work with them. We staff some of their Santas, but in essence, they're selling a photo. And I think that that's not what the public wants. So we haven't moved into that. Easter Bunny's a small business, can't differentiate the same way. I can put a 16-year-old kid in a great Easter Bunny mascot and talk to them for 5 minutes, and they'll be pretty good. Yeah. They'll be 80% as good as the Dallas Mavericks mascot because it's not a real beard, a real belly, and real jolly. Whereas hire Santa, a Santa Claus, we can differentiate, we can charge a premium. So we are looking for other things. We actually just launched this year Hire Mariachis, which are mariachi bands.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So hiremariachis.com. And the reason for that is many of our clients asked for it, as well as it has a similar demand structure across the country. It's not just the South. Hispanic culture is throughout the United States. It's fast growing, and mariachi bands are used not just for Cinco de Mayo, but quinceañeras, other types of celebrations. And so we're just now in the process of generating demand as well as then creating the database of entertainers for that as well. But we're always looking. So if you have ideas or your listeners have ideas, reach out to me. We're always looking for ways that we can use our core competencies here and apply them to other areas.
And it sounds like you're also using that same thinking where it's you got to have the client first, right? So it sounds like people ask for mariachis. So listeners, if you have an idea, make sure you're asking because he will deliver.
So when you talk about feedback loops, right, from your customers, and you're a very technical, tech savvy guy, what are some of the tools that you currently utilize to help amplify and stay in touch with your customers?
Well, for customers, one, it is HubSpot. We use HubSpot. We're a very active user. So we'll, shout out to the HubSpot network. We could use any discounts you can give us. HubSpot's really great. And email marketing, I think, is underutilized within a big component of using sequences. And for those that don't know, a sequence, you send out an email, and if they don't respond to it within however many days, say 3 days, an automatic email sent out again. If they don't respond again within, say, 7 days, you can send out another email, and on and on and on. So you're automating your email outreach to your customers or prospective customers. And that is a great way to then have repeat clients. And speaking of repeat clients, after an event, shoot another email out to them, asking for reviews, Google reviews in particular, making sure that you get those Google reviews. But then also those past clients are also your future clients. And for us as a service business, we need a large percentage of our past clients to rebook for us this year. And we're well over 80% of our past clients, I think it's probably more than that, rebook us for the next year. And if we can do a lot of that booking early in the season when we're not as busy, those are the things that we want to do. So I would say HubSpot's probably the biggest one from new customer creation as well as staying in touch with our past customers.
I love that. Can you share a little bit more just about like the model approach itself? I know you shared like the story of Joy dressing up as Santa, ended up making it into a business because, you had a ton of demand. But it's interesting because we've seen other pitches on Shark Tank that have taken kind of similar approaches of like a service as opposed to a product, but they focus almost on this like one-to-many kind of approach where it's like you go to a show or a catered like dinner or there's some kind of like event as opposed to like that one-on-one Santa's coming to your event. I'm very curious to know how you came up with the model and
implemented.
Why you feel like this model is best fit. Yeah.
Okay. So I went to Stanford Business School, asked them to create business school.
Wait,
I'm
where
entirely
are we going
joking.
with Stanford?
You said you were prepared. I believe it.
It's like, wow, you really prepared.
No. So I think I found that I can't even think of a business. Maybe Hire Santa is the only one that really started this way that wasn't an extension of another business that we already had. And so you can create the history looking back and say, oh, this was obvious I was going to do this. But in the reality, you have a business and then, oh, something happens and I think I could create a business from that. And it's very organic about creating it. And Hire Santa, most of it just happened by coincidence or by luck, whatever it happens to be, that originally I was appearing as Santa. You can go to our website and maybe see a picture of me as Santa. But think of Tim Allen as Santa, glue on beard. Like I'm a nerd, but I guess I'm an all-in guy as well. And so
good combination.
Glue on beard, I've got a fat suit on, and I started doing home visits. So I was doing this individual home visit. And then my online advertising, it was basically that as well. Some companies started reaching out to me. I started doing some corporate visits, but it wasn't this thought, oh, I'm going to do malls or I'm going to have these big outdoor retailers and do full season Santas, or I'm going to send Santas over to Dubai or China or the Middle East, wherever it is. All the things we do now, that wasn't in the business plan. The business plan was, hey, it's sort of an interesting business. I'm making a little bit of money and it's just meeting the demand. Whatever's happening, people wanting you to come to Santa for a home visit or to a grand opening or a customer appreciation event. Yes, we'll send those Santas. And then we're doing that and we're filling up with demand. It's, hey, we can start staffing full season Santas where maybe the hourly rate is much lower, the hourly profit is much lower, but you're doing 200, 300, 400 hours per chair over the course of a season. So that really exploded our revenue, was then opening up that new market in essence, going away from just home visits and small gigs is what we call them, to now full season events where we're now, the dollar figure is, 100 times more.
Were there any challenges that you had when you were like making that shift from almost like B2C to B2B, right? Where you were getting those big contracts? Like, did you have any growing pains there in terms of like how you had to shift, how you were acquiring talent, how you were thinking about marketing, or all of the above?
Oh yeah, so many growing pains. And really was fortunate that from my past business experience, I want to hire somebody who is a better person than what I need at this time. And so I made a very lucky, fortunate, skillful, I'll call it skillful
there you go.
now, but I hired Jenny. She's unbelievably amazing. Actually, the year I was on Shark Tank. And so she actually got to go through that. But that year, we had massive growth, like 300%.
Wow.
That growth because we were expanding into full season work. And, I think what I call them, my number two. These are the people that can run my business better than I can. And she's one of those people. And what's great about it is I didn't know how to do full season events and we're just figuring it out. But she's able to also be flexible enough to figure those things out. And at the time we're working off, Google Sheets and we're just winging it. And
trying to make it work.
As an entrepreneur, you just got to make it work. As an entrepreneur, that's many times what you do is you don't want to promise things you can't deliver.
Right.
But in many ways, you want to say yes to money. Like that's one of my business lessons. Somebody's offering you money, say yes. Don't say all the reasons why you can't do it. If you think you can do it or if you can do it, just say yes. And then figure out all the stuff behind what you're going to do. So we made a lot of mistakes that year, but luckily they're all internal. Like we weren't trying to do it. And as well, we do tens of thousands of hours of Santa visits in the chair every year, home visits, corporate visits, mall type stuff. And we mess up sometimes. Even if you're 99.99% perfect, well, there's that 0.01%. And if you do 20,000, just those large numbers, you've messed up 20 hours or however many hours, 20 hours. And those are people that are saying, you've ruined Christmas for us. It's just
no pressure.
Yeah. So, things happen, whether it be Santa's fault, the weather's fault, the client's fault, whatever it is. And we have to then address those issues and communicate, come up with a solution to them, fix them if we can. But those things are just, part and parcel of owning a business.
You live and learn.
You mentioned to our producer too that there is a little bit of some acquisition plays specifically for Hire Santa. Would love to just hear more about kind of like the strategy there. I'm sure it was probably loosely related to SEO if I had to guess.
And credibility if I had to guess.
So we actually, in the previous 2 years, we bought a Santa agencies, regional agencies, and it just sort of fits into what we're doing. It also helps the Santa community. 2 years ago, we bought Santa Claus and Company out of Arizona. They're a regional agency. In fact, they were the oldest Santa Claus staffing company. When we bought them, that was their 50th year in business. So it's part of us like continuing on that legacy. Mm-hmm. So I guess we can say Hire Santa is the longest active Santa Claus staffing agency in the world now. And we also then bought another one in the Northeast, which is I'm Santa. And they had pockets of clients as well as, equally importantly, Santas. As I've mentioned before, our limiting factor is we need more Santas. And so each of these had their own network of Santas and entertainers. And so we were able to bring them into the Hire Santa fold. And it's funny how we met them. It's just being part of the community. So the Santa community is very small. We get together annually for a big conference. And it was at a conference that I met the owners of both of these companies who were wanting to transition to just be Santa. They were Santas themselves. And they were tired of the 12-hour days of working on the business, doing all the scheduling and all the back end stuff, when they really just wanted to spend time as being Santa and spreading the love of Christmas. And so we were able to work out a deal with both of those. And we're currently negotiating with some other ones. And we're always looking for, whether it be Santa staffing agencies, family entertainment, or other adjacent or nearly adjacent companies that are a good fit for the Hire Santa brand and are looking to utilize our skills to help their company grow, as well as to fold into Hire Santa.
That's awesome. Were there any differences between, onboarding an acquired Santa versus a Santa that you may have reached out to organically and had in the system? Like, what are some of those
from the
beginning? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And again, we're always hunting for Santas. And even in, say that there's differences between Arizona and in the Northeast, those Santa organizations. And it is about trying to just bring them into the fold, because many times, we're now the biggest Santa staffing company. And so you don't want to be perceived as sort of the big bad company. Mm-hmm. Like for us, Hire Santa, we take pride in being part of the Santa Claus community. We contribute, we sponsor events, we put out lots of great content, we go and train. And so we really want to be part of the Santa community so that when we acquire these companies, they already know who we are and they know who I am. And I go visit them and I talk to them. And so there's still some Santas that are anti-agency and just want to do something. But for the most part, we win them over. And if we don't win you over today, you're going to see us tomorrow and you're going to see us next year. And because we're evergreen, 10 years from now, you're going to still be seeing us. And eventually you're going to go, I'm going to work with Hire Santa because they're here. We always pay our Santas on time, regardless if we get paid. There's been some agencies that don't. Like, we're known. We always pay our Santas. We pay when we say we're going to pay. And we want to be an active part of the community. So I think that's helped us. But, there's always some that, don't want to work with us.
No, it definitely helps having that cachet a little bit with the community. And they know and trust and love Hire Santa.
So one question I have, though, and something that you've sort of hinted at, is the idea of bringing Santa international, right? So you started as a US-based company. It sounds like you're starting to expand internationally. How have you even begun to think about breaking into other countries' markets and cornering their markets as the one place to go for Santa?
And with all the cultural differences.
Yeah,
too.
all the cultural differences. Exactly.
It's a good question. I just got back from Singapore and it's interesting. You're right. The cultures are different, but Christmas is really universal. Mm-hmm. And even outside of sort of the Christian faith, Christmas is really universal. Brands use Christmas to sell regardless of the culture that you're in. And most cultures have or want the American version of Santa. And I'll say sort of the Coca-Cola version of Santa, because that Coca-Cola sort of really commercialized it in ways that I think so. So they want American Santas. They want the American version of Santa, the Coca-Cola version of Santa. And they find Hire Santa online because of search engine optimization, primarily. And so we actually ship American Santas overseas. A really great client of ours is Ski to Buy. In the middle of the desert, there is a ski slope. In the middle of the desert, it's 26 degrees. You go in and you ski on real snow.
Cool.
And for the last many years, they've been a great client. We send 2 Santas over there from the United States, ship them over there. They stay for more than a month.
Wow.
Fun.
And they see Santa, and they call it their Santa's Grotto, which is in 26 degrees. It's colder there than most of our Santas in the U.S. deal with. So you got to dress warm. And it's an American English-speaking Santa. Most luckily, English is a universal language. A lot of expats in that area, and a lot of holidayers. And so it's American Santa. And we sent Santa to China, the Caribbean. We'll send it wherever. We've got several clients in Canada.
Cool.
I don't know if that really counts.
It does. It's international.
But it is.
Yeah, for sure.
It is actually, and it really is. Sending Santas to Canada is 100 times more difficult than sending them to Dubai for a month to work. Like Canada has some very strict work requirements.
Policies.
Yeah.
Cool. So Santa's everywhere these days.
That's right.
Well, we hoped you enjoyed this interview. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for joining us. I feel like I just got like a mini MBA of like not just Santa, but like how to like run a business. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
If you're interested in either becoming Santa Claus or hiring Santa at your next event, check out www.hiresanta.com.
Mitch, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Production for today's episode was brought to you by Arie Desormeaux. Editing comes from Robert Hartwig and support from Alfred Schulz. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, or wherever you subscribe to the greatest podcasts ever. That does it for me. See you next week in the tank for another bite. Create Like the Greats, hosted by Ross Simmons, is brought to you by the HubSpot Podcast Network, the audio destination for business professionals. Each episode hosts an in-depth analysis of some of the greatest creations and creators of all time, along with deep dive conversations on the creative process that went into building companies and brands. If you like learning about history or learning about the creative process, you'll like this podcast. Listen to Create Like the Greats wherever you get your podcasts.